Did you know that China is home to incredible rivers, mountains, and forests? Whether it's vast green lands or spectacular wildlife, there's a lot to explore in these biggest desert projects China is building. One thing all deserts have in common is that they're arid or dry. Most experts agree that a desert is an area of land that receives no more than 25 centimeters or 10 inches of precipitation a year. In all deserts, there's a little water available for plants and other organisms. There are lots of questions running through your mind. When and how did China start these projects? Stay tuned, focused, and follow us, even as we take you on a ride out of this world. So in this video, we'll be highlighting 3 biggest projects you never knew that China is building. From how 100,000 farmers turned China deserts into green forests, to how they employed 180,000 workers to build mega reservoirs in the desert, and lastly, how it took them 10 years to build a new city in the desert. Before we get started, kindly like, subscribe, share, and comment on our videos. The first project will blow your mind off this world. Project 1. How 100,000 farmers turned China deserts into green forest. How did China transform deserts into green forests? China, as one of the countries with the most desert territory in the world, used to erect a city wall made of stones and sand to block a tiny portion of the dust when sandstorms threatened their villages. However, since they no longer require these, they have successfully grown a desert forest, a significant feat for a country the size of the United States with a population of 1.4 billion people. However, only 13% of the land can be used to cultivate food, but they're self-sufficient. They now not only grow abundant food on farmland, but also successfully develop the desert as arable land in desert areas that used to be through their agricultural technology in arid areas without rain. Potatoes, tomatoes, watermelons, and various vegetables have been grown comparably. However, the significant status quo is the result of approximately 2,000 Chinese people who spent nearly a century battling the desert. I don't think any country on the planet could have had such patience and persistence in the 1980s. China now has the world's biggest desertification region, the most afflicted population, and the most severe sandstorm damage. Desertification caused harm to 18 provinces and 528 cities at a period when China was struggling to find food and clothes. It is not as developed as it is now, and the invasion of the desert causes them to have a survival dilemma. They will become hungry, impoverished, and forced to move as desert land continues to grow. However, it was eventually determined that people's hopeless displacement may only increase the desert size. In the end, not only will the desert devour the land, but the sand and dust will inflict harm wherever it goes, posing a major threat to people's health. You might be wondering, how could China overcome this challenge? So they decided to turn their sorrow into joy by investing in building different versatile projects in the desert. They decided to launch a desert resistance movement in order to slow the growth of the desert. They will need a lot of money and people to combat the desert for a long period. Tens of thousands of volunteers, both Chinese and international, take part in the event each year. Over the last 30 years, 7,000 Japanese volunteers have traveled to China one after the other to help with desert control, contributing to the greening of this desert. China has also created a memorial in the desert to the deceased old guy. Until recently, the Chinese have never contemplated abandoning desert greening in order to protect their country. China has made tremendous success in desert greening, with vast areas of desertification turned to agriculture, people growing food and huge trees, and millions of people benefiting from improved land use. So many countries were shocked by the tremendous transformation China is experiencing in the desert. At the time, the news shook the whole globe. From Australia, Saudi Arabia, Algeria, and other countries dispatched scientists to assess the situation firsthand. When they watched the changes in desert greening in China, they were proud of the country. Yes, I mean the whole globe was proud of China. Let's look at 4 of China's more effective desert government models. The first government model on effective desert is currently the world's only effective desert greening. The percentage of desert vegetation covered ranges from 0 to 53%, which is considered miraculous. This desert is located on a plateau, encompassing 1.45 million hectares, although the average annual rainfall is just approximately 250 millimeters. Actually, 3,000 years ago, this area was a forest, but owing to overcrowding, it became a desert. The original biological habitat was destroyed. It became a piece of dry ground, and gradually, the soil quality here declined. and the original lush woods became a sea of death with no grass. People had to migrate to other areas in order to survive until 30 years ago, when the government built a grid sand barrier in the desertified area using wicker inserted into a grate shape to lock the sand in the grid and then planting a fast-growing rate in the sand. The water supply is essential for tall plants' growth. They add yellow river water here to make lakes and sustain the plants. For the past 30 years, 100,000 herders have aided with desert control. After years of hard work, significant progress has been made in the Desert Control Project, and ranchers have finally seen a green home as the world's largest desert greening project. Kabuki is already a textbook wonder of the world. In September 2017, the United Nations produced the first study on ecological wealth. The fact is that Kabuki has regenerated and greened 6,256 square kilometers of desert, generating more than 500 billion yuan in ecological riches and assisting 100,000 local farmers and ranchers. The one roaring sandstorm is long gone, and the forest coverage rate in this desert is 15.7%, with vegetation coverage rate of 53%, making it a model for desertification management across the world. So then, who sponsors the desert control? In China, desert control is sponsored not just by the government, but also by numerous businesses and regular citizens who pay money freely. For example, Jack Ma's Alibaba firm has an app that allows individuals to utilize their own food, jogging usage, and so on to create green energy to claim desert plants. These trees will bear your initials. Through the software, individuals have planted 55.52 million trees in China's deserts, safeguarding around 40,000 square meters of desert. These trees are critical for avoiding sandstorms and benefiting the environment. They were vital in the second-largest desert. This desert is greater in area than Taiwan. It spans 40,000 square kilometers in Shanxi province. It's one among China's four main deserts. 600 acres of desert have been converted to lush land, and the desert will soon vanish from the map. This desert Chinese took 50 years to control. At the beginning, the size of this desert green space was pitifully little, at only 0.9%. The ongoing dust invasion caused the 100,000 residents to evacuate collectively. Since 1959, China has spent much on sand control for local farms. The government pays money, the people contribute, and farmers who engage in this task can only obtain a wage to sell their own food and clothing difficulties in the sand control process. They carry out sand fixation work, redirect water to remove sand, build irrigation, plant trees, enhance soil, and the government will also suitably conduct artificial rains after 6 years of people's unrelenting efforts. Almost 600 acres of sandy desert soil have been converted to arable land. There are 4 big protected forest belts of 1,000 kilometers in length. The afforestation area is 16.29 million blue square kilometers, and the forest and grass coverage rate has improved from 0.9%. More than 6 million more of the city's quicksand has been rectified or partially fixed, resulting in a regional reversal of desertification. At the same time as roads were created in the desert, tourism was established, and the local population's income was enhanced. Really good results of up to 6 tons per year were obtained. It's also a battle between humans in the desert. Fortunately, after endless attempts, humans have achieved triumph. This desert is only about 70 kilometers from Beijing, China's capital. The 200 Desert is the world's smallest desert, yet its dust frequently floods farms and communities, paralyzing roads and trains. Every year, many tons of sand and dust flood into Beijing, significantly affecting people's health and costing China hundreds of millions of dollars in economic damages. The creation of this desert remains a mystery. The desert spreads for several kilometers, glittering golden in the sun, and the barren ground is formed of purple hue like coarse gravel, indicating that the sand in the desert is gathered from the earth. When it rises, it is not in one piece with the earth below. There is no sand source within a few hundred kilometers of the desert, forming an unusual panorama with the surrounding tourist sites, old ruins, and ancient castles. China constructed a research institution test site here a few decades ago, but it has been dry and rainy for more than 10 years and is certified. The test location is around 30 meters high and roughly 1 square kilometers in size. Every windy season, the vast sand dunes are loaded with yellow sand, but the rapidly deteriorating ecological environment not only impacts scientific research and experiment jobs, but also puts Beijing in danger of sand and dust. How then can China curtail this danger? The government dispatched 20,000 personnel here in 2003 to establish a desert control team to recover wasteland and afforestation. There are 2 million trees that have survived, and the natural situation has greatly improved. This desert is now separated into 2 sections, one of which is a film and television city and the other a tourism destination. Every year, a large number of visitors come here to play, as do their film and television producers. It is the best desert for humans. The 4th Lama China now has the world's biggest desertification region, the most afflicted population, and the most severe sandstorm damage. Khan Desert is located in Xinjiang and is China's biggest desert. Long ago, China found huge oil resource under the desert. They began the path of sand control in this desert, not just construction in this desert in order to extract oil. Several motorways and a high-speed railway line have been constructed, and a new city with a population of over 20,000 has been established in this desert. They arrive with a huge number of trees successfully planted on both sides of the road to manage the sand. Despite the presence of more green vegetation than previously, it appears to be a long way from the previous 3 deserts. The explanation for this is that rainfall in this desert is nearly non-existent. Although China has recently discovered a reservoir beneath this desert, developing water resources in the desert without adequate precipitation is exceedingly challenging. It is hard to talk about greening, but the Chinese have not given up on managing this desert and since transportation. They've also turned this location into a tourist destination. Each year, a large number of people visit. As long as you are prepared to fix it now and safeguard the ecological environment so that everything is in order, our global ecosystem will improve. The deserts of China are absolutely fascinating, yet surprisingly, most of us know very little about them. So what exactly makes the deserts of China so interesting? The second project will blow your mind off. Project 2. China employed 180,000 workers to build mega reservoirs in the desert. Is China insane? The world's largest desert reservoir, which will take 40 years to develop, will employ 180,000 people. Once completed, it'll be capable of irrigating an area of 900,000 acres, turning the barren desert green. It also has various additional applications such as flood control, fish farming, sand management, and tourism. Given that there are no water sources in the desert, where does the water for this reservoir originate from? This desert reservoir in northern China was constructed in 1958. Because of its position in the parched desert, it is also known as the Hanhe Pearl. Desert reservoirs are uncommon in China, if not the entire world. Thus, calling it a pearl dot isn't too far-fetched. Furthermore, the reservoir has a volume of 148 million cubic meters. It's also Asia's largest man-made desert reservoir with a capacity similar to 10 less lakes in Hangzhou, China. So why is China interested in constructing reservoirs in the desert? Unless there's a lot of oil in the desert, I don't think any government wants to use the desert to create projects since the desert climate has no advantages. The labor cost of any project in the desert is high. The project requires a lot of money, and it's hard to produce profit in the near term while China is the polar opposite. China has several projects in the desert. They have more than 1,000 kilometers of desert railways, 500 kilometers of desert highways, and several solar-powered units in the desert. The reason China wants to create reservoirs is that desertification is a big problem in China, and they desperately need water to regulate the desert. Desert greening has long been an important desert effort. In China, they have spent over a century in this initiative. At the moment, China is also the most successful desert greening country. However, if you truly want to manage the desert, you must first address the issue of desert water scarcity. As a result, China must construct a reservoir in this desert to retain water in order to regulate the desert, allowing millions of citizens to live in a metropolis free of sand and dust. China's land area is 9.6 million square kilometers, the same as the United States, but their desert area exceeds 700,000 square kilometers, and their desert no man's land reaches 1.2 million square kilometers. Every year, severe land degradation and desertification cost China at least $208 million. Furthermore, China's deserts are increasing at a rate of about 3,000 square kilometers every year. So far, the desert has devoured 50,000 square kilometers of rich land, roughly the size of a small to medium-sized nation. It is situated at the meeting point of 2 large deserts, the ever-expanding Tanger Desert on one side and the Baden Garon Desert on the other. The yellow sand is roaring, life is dead, and the urban population can only continue to move away. There are hints that the two huge deserts will be linked together due to the desert's continual expansion. So in 1958, China decided to construct a massive reservoir here. Perhaps you're wondering where the reservoir's water supply comes from. The reservoir's water supply is mostly the Xinjiang River in the Chilean highlands, which is the third biggest river in the Hanxi corridor. It is made up of 4 sections. The first is the infiltration of surface water from the middle and upper sections of the Xinjiang River, as well as spring water exposed by subsurface movement to the northern margin of the Wei Basin. The other is the mountain water and spring water in the upper stages of the Xinjiang River that have not been used for irrigation and have not penetrated into the groundwater, as well as other receding water in the intermediate reaches, including discharged sewage. The third is a flood during flood season. The fourth is the expansion of the Jingyi and Phase project to transport water to Menxin. What are the advantages of constructing a reservoir? Water conveyance tunnels, floodgates, and the West Dam's unique spillway are all part of the reservoir. It is mostly used for water storage and irrigation, but it also has broader applications such as flood control, fishing, and tourism. The dam is 8,016 meters long, 15 meters tall, and has a reservoir size of 26 square kilometers. The catchment area is 13,400 square kilometers, and the irrigated agricultural field area surpasses 900,000 acres, enough to supply domestic water to 250,000 people in the surrounding region. Residents who used to reside nearby had to spend money on food when their farms were abandoned, but they can now rely on the reservoir's water for development. Following the building of this reservoir, agriculture has earned economic revenue. They no longer have to worry about water supplies and their lives are improving. It also helped to boost the local fishing and tourist industries. The reservoir's prime viewing season is from April to October, thus many people visit it. The river's surface is gleaming with silver light, and the trees, meadows, water surface, and sand dunes are all intertwined. The breathtaking beauty of the desert surrounded by clean water with green mountains reflecting the blue waves is breathtaking. There are not only natural swimming pools in the reservoir, but also entire infrastructure and service goods, units for visitors to relax and entertain, and numerous areas that entice people to visit and have a very high decorative and tourism value. People's initial impressions of the desert are frequently that the sky is full with sparsely inhabited sand and dust, and that it's a lifeless wasteland. Many people believe that building a reservoir in an arid desert is an unachievable vision. However, China has achieved this plan. You may be wondering why this reservoir was created in the desert. Given the dryness of the desert, what challenges did China face in constructing this reservoir? The reservoir was created in 1958 at a time when mechanization was primitive and food and clothes were expensive. The difficulties and hurdles encountered throughout the construction phase were the reservoirs to be created between the Tanger Desert and the Bad and Garon Desert were unthinkable, where the temperature is really hot and there is a lot of water evaporating every day. If the reservoir's water supply runs out, the reservoir's area will diminish or perhaps dry up. Furthermore, it is influenced by geological forces. There's also a severe problem with water seepage, which is exacerbated by high winds and sand, which create deep and thick sediment to collect in the reservoir. Planting trees to manage sand has therefore become a primary goal for the reservoir's development. To avoid sand, it is required to grow wheatgrass around the reservoir to fix sand and plants such as the sand juju, which is popular. Despite the obstacles, these dedicated and kind people did not falter. They're fully aware that if they don't work hard to create a reservoir, they would be forced to evacuate this region in the future. As a result, 180,000 builders proceeded to build the reservoir without interruption, despite the difficulty of construction. The building time was constantly postponed. Construction began in 1958 and was finished 40 years later in 1998. It took the difficulties of numerous generations of Chinese people. Engineers diverted the Xinjiang River to gather as much water as possible when creating the reservoir, neglecting the concern of environmental protection. A surprising event occurred. This resulted in a dramatic decrease in river flow, and the higher portions of the Xinjiang River finally ceased to flow. The surrounding clinging to the lake dried up in less than a year because the local environmental restoration capacity is weak. The flora cannot be regenerated, and the soil layer has been very dry, exacerbating the desertification of the region as a result of the reservoir's construction. Many builders were deeply disappointed since the reservoir provides energy to the barren environment while simultaneously causing harm. As a result, limiting its impact on desert areas is a primary goal, according to research specialists who believe that the restoration of their reservoir's biological environment may learn from the experience and adopt closure and diversion. Water from the same source can flow in different directions so that the flow does not dry up, and it can also store water for the reservoir. Once the reservoir's water is saturated, people can switch off the reservoir's water supply. The excess water should then be sent to other places so that the usage rate of water resources is maximized. Thankfully, after much effort, the local biological environment has finally been rehabilitated prior to the reservoir's construction. Xinjiang County in Gansu Province was a desert with dry air and scarce flora before the reservoir was created. But now there is water in the trees and the dam is encircled by a 17.4 square meter green belt with limitless sand dunes behind it. This reservoir now irrigates over 600,000 acres of local agricultural land, ensuring the survival and growth of the oasis in Xinjiang County, Gansu Province. With the continual development of China's sand control team, it may be called a big Chinese miracle. People have achieved good achievements in desert management by using reservoirs. A total of 1,300 hectares of sand management have been accomplished. The surrounding green vegetation has expanded by 230 hectares, and the desertified land has decreased by 17 hectares. It is expected that China will use this initiative as a chance to create other megawater conservation projects in the future, eventually turning more deserts into oases. Take a deep breath and relax even as we take the last and third project for this video, which will be the icing on the cake. This third project explains how China spent 10 years to build a new city in the desert. China took 10 years to develop a new metropolis amid the world's biggest desert. This bizarre and massive effort astounded American experts. We're all aware that the desert is a lonely, forbidding place to live with exceptionally terrible living conditions. The desert is fully covered in sand, rain is sparse, and humans and vegetation cannot live. Desert greening has become a worldwide issue, and people are paying more attention to sweets. But why is China going backwards by relocating people to the desert to live? And what type of life do they live there? China has one of the world's greatest desert areas, distribution, and major desertification dangers. The Keqiang Desert is the most renowned in China. This miraculous metropolis is being constructed in the desert's hinterland. This little city is also China's sole desert city. There are 20,000 individuals living here. They come from various cities in China and settle here since this desert is rich in oil resources. They have to relocate to the desert to collect oil, and surviving in the desert will definitely provide significant obstacles. This is commendable given that the desert is one of the hottest and lowest regions on the planet. It practically never rains here. In the summer, the temperature may reach 67 degrees Celsius. In the winter, it can drop below -20 degrees Celsius, and 1/3 of the year is a sandstorm day. In order to fulfill the objective of oil extraction today, we must face such a difficult environment. They've been in the desert metropolis for 7 years, and they also have turned the desert green, the initial group of sand-controlled personnel. China is a large oil consumer. The majority of oil is purchased from other nations at a high cost, and China has spent decades persevering since 1950. Finally, in the outskirts of the Keqiang Desert, a substantial amount of oil and several oil fields were discovered in 1985. If China does not import oil, oil field reserves might reach 7.5 billion tons. This oil will last China 10 years. Therefore, they must extract it here, yet they wish to stay in this desert. The extraction of oil is incredibly difficult, and the area of quicksand here is the greatest in the world. Because of the buildup of yellow sand, howling winds, and lack of water supplies, residents dub this desert the Sea of Death. People live here, and the only way to identify the drinking water problem is to move the water supply from outside. There was no route to the outside world in the early days, allowing big-scale equipment for exploration and development to enter the desert hinterland and the recovered oil and gas to be moved out of the desert seamlessly. Since 1990, the residents of the city have chosen to enter the Sea of Death, constructing several highways to the outside world. It took China 5 years to create the first road, which was more than 500 kilometers long and ran from north to south through the desert. China will develop new highways to the outside world in this desert during the next 10 years. This desert now has 5 highways heading to the outer world. It is no longer a restricted region for life, and people may come and go via highways. The second issue to be addressed is sand control. There are 20,000 individuals living here. If the sand and dust problem is not addressed, this 10-year-old city will be engulfed by quicksand. Because of the sandstorm, the people who live here will suffer from a health crisis and may die. In order to provide residents with a healthy living environment and to keep the highways on both sides of the desert from being buried by quicksand, the city was built in 2000. China began organizing staff for large-scale sand prevention and management. As a result, in order to safeguard the road, oil workers here have made desert greening their second priority. They use sand fixing and greening techniques such as braiding hay into squares and sewing it on the desert, extending more than 100 meters on both sides of the road, and then using geotextiles to build a divider to plant trees on squares in the center of the grass squares. What a good way to count your costs before embarking on a project. The whole green belt uses drip irrigation technology, and an irrigation booster station is installed every 2 kilometers, which has been supervised for many years by forest rangers. The popular Frederica tree, which was planted in the desert 20 years ago, has grown into a tall tree, and the people who live here no longer face the yellow sand in the sky, but instead see green vitality. After several years of research, researchers chose the types of plants appropriate for life in the desert from a list of more than 70 species that are resistant to extreme temperatures, wind, and sand. These surviving plants successfully slowed the flow of the desert on both sides of the road, thereby limiting the route's recurrent harassment from quicksand. Since 2003, the Keqiang Desert Protection Forest Ecological Project has been established on both sides of the 5 roadways. Green plants with a width of more than 70 meters have been planted on both sides, covering an area of more than 3,500 hectares in total. They're great ideas for when you have a break and a sand obsession such as Juju and Heloxalon, 300,000 Heloxalon and 20,000 population. Frederica are in Keqiang Desert's hinterland. Furthermore, in order to allow plants to receive sufficient water sources, tens of thousands of kilometers of water supply, pipes on both sides of the road, and solar water supply stations have been created. Here, 86 solar power stations are capable of pumping power to serve plants, water sources, and to protect the greening of well homes. After 20 years of sand control efforts, workers completed the first zero-carbon desert roadway project. After the hard effort of the city and adjacent communities, the Keqiang Desert is no longer barren and dreary. A green corridor in the Keqiang Desert has been achieved. The greening job of 1,000 movements has been accomplished, and this enigmatic region had been awakened by large-scale oil exploration and development oil workers. China is gradually making the desert an admired place to live. Not only did they extract oil in this huge desert, but they also helped build roads and regulate sand, resulting in a beautiful green miracle. Humans have successfully controlled the desert. The Keqiang Desert, which no one went there before, has now become a tourist destination, which not only stimulates local economic growth, but also enhances the surrounding living environment. It is magnificent. Formerly, there were no animals here. Now flora grows on both sides of the desert road, more than 100 kinds of birds migrate and nest along the screen channel, and the biological environment in the desert hinterland has steadily developed. What a great transformation thus far for China, turning the desert into a habitat for people to live. People in this desert city are no longer lonely since the green promenade is progressively increasing. As the desert changes, an increasing number of people come here to play every day, and the city has become a tourist destination. Beautiful places are getting increasingly popular. This location will become a popular tourist destination in the future, and the lives of oil employees here will no longer be monotonous. Sand control is becoming increasingly popular. People wish to contribute selflessly to the greening of the desert. I believe that more people will move here in the future and that by 2024, this desert will be a good area for everyone to live, and it'll be a habitat of versatile resources. What are your thoughts on the desert's future growth? Let us know what you think in the comments section below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more content on China mega projects from our YouTube channel.